Before the sun had even risen over the quiet city of Ouagadougou, a young African leader sat alone in his office, staring at a file that would change everything. The night was still, but inside the presidential palace, the weight of betrayal hung heavy in the air. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the youthful president of Burkina Faso, held in his hands the evidence of a plot, one that threatened not just his leadership, but the sovereignty of an entire nation. For years, Traoré had stood as a symbol of resistance in West Africa, a soldier turned statesman, fighting to free his country from the legacy of colonial dominance and foreign interference. But what happens when your greatest threat isn't an external force, but the man who once sat beside you in war rooms and family dinners? The voice on the intercepted recording was unmistakable. It belonged to General Moussa Konaté, one of Traoré's closest allies. And that voice was calmly discussing how to remove the president from power. This story isn't just about a failed coup. It's about loyalty and betrayal. It's about the thin line between patriotism and ambition. And above all, it's about how a single moment, before dawn, can determine the fate of millions. You're about to witness how trust crumbles, how power moves in shadows, and how one man made a choice that would either preserve his country's independence, or plunge it into chaos. It started with a routine surveillance operation, nothing unusual, just a monitoring program by the National Intelligence Service to keep tabs on suspicious foreign corporate activity. A French mining company operating in Burkina Faso had raised red flags due to irregular gold export patterns and suspected bribery. But what the intelligence agents uncovered went far beyond corruption. It was treason. As audio files rolled in from intercepted phone calls, analysts first thought they were listening to a disgruntled business negotiation. But then came the voice. Calm, calculated, and frighteningly familiar. It was General Moussa Konaté. His words were precise, lacking any trace of hesitation. He spoke not only of a coup, but of a carefully engineered power shift. A slow, deliberate dismantling of the presidency from within. "Are we ready for the operation?" the French operative asked. "We're almost there. A few more positions to place and the structure will be complete," Konaté replied without emotion. That he even described the timeline. 6 months, maybe less. Traoré is popular, yes, he admitted. But when the economy stumbles, the people will turn. And when they do, we'll be there, with our people already in place. The call lasted 37 minutes. Every second was filled with details that turned President Traoré's stomach. Names of army commanders already bought or ideologically aligned, key units under foreign influence, vulnerabilities in the palace security layout. Konaté spoke like a man laying blueprints for a building. Except the structure he was building was a betrayal. Even more chilling was the plan's elegance. Konaté wasn't planning an overt assassination. "We'll place him under house arrest," he said. "We'll tell the public he's mentally unfit. It'll be temporary, just for national stability, of course. But it won't be temporary. And no one will question it." Worse still, the man coordinating with him wasn't just a corporate agent. Voice analysis confirmed the French contact worked for Paris Secret Operations Division, a covert arm responsible for sustaining influence in West Africa. President Traoré had read the transcript 3 times before dawn. Each line etched itself into his mind like a scar. This wasn't just political betrayal, it was deeply personal. He and Konaté had fought side by side. They had dreamed together of an independent Burkina Faso. And now, Konaté was the one trying to undo everything. To understand the depth of the betrayal, you have to understand the friendship. Ibrahim Traoré and Moussa Konaté weren't just colleagues, they were brothers in arms. In the early days of the transition, they had shared late-night strategy meetings, argued over defense policy, and celebrated small victories like brothers returning from the same battlefield. Their bond wasn't forged in politics but in purpose. They had walked through military academies together, both rising through the ranks during Burkina Faso's most unstable years. When Traore first spoke of ending foreign dependency and charting a truly independent course for the country, Connate was one of the few who didn't flinch. He was there when French bases were shuttered. He had helped design the new doctrine of military sovereignty. His name was on the documents that welcomed Russian advisors and approved cooperation with the Wagner Group. And in private, they laughed with each other's families, broke bread at quiet dinners, and watched their children play in the same yards. Connate's wife, Fatima, had become close with Traoré's wife. Their children had birthday parties together. On the surface, theirs was a friendship that went beyond strategy and geopolitics. It was rooted in shared dreams for their homeland. That's what made it so lethal. The betrayal wasn't just about military plans or power grabs. It was about someone who knew Traoré's routines, what time he rose, who he met with privately, where the palace's surveillance gaps were. Connate had given up more than state secrets, he had sold the intimate trust of a friend. That's what pierced deepest. When Traore read that Connate had discussed which guards could be bribed and which routes he took when alone, it felt less like a coup and more like an execution being mapped out. Traore wasn't naive. He knew politics was dangerous, that enemies could lurk in marble halls or wear friendly faces. But this wasn't just politics. This was betrayal wrapped in the skin of brotherhood. It raised haunting questions. If Connate could betray him, who else could? How many other smiles around him hid secret allegiances? The idealism Traore had carried into office, the belief that loyalty and love of country could defeat decades of neocolonial influence, was cracking under the weight of this one relationship. It wasn't just the country that was at risk of being dismantled. It was Traoré's own belief in people. As the first hues of dawn painted the sky over Ouagadougou, President Ibrahim Traoré stood in his office, staring through the glass at a city still asleep. He had read the file 3 times. The betrayal wasn't a possibility, it was fact. The man he once trusted with his country, with his life, had plotted to dethrone him. And now, he had to choose, confront or delay. Expose or observe? Traore wasn't a man prone to paranoia, but this wasn't a time for doubt. He picked up his secure line and dialed the only person he knew he could trust without question. Mamadou Origo, his childhood friend and current chief of presidential security. They had grown up on the same dusty streets, climbed the military ladder side by side, and earned their stripes in battles that others only read about. If there was anyone who would stand by him in this storm, it was Mamadou. Mamadou, come to the palace. Immediately. And call General Connate. Don't tell him anything. Just say the president needs him urgently, Traore instructed. It was just past 5 a.m. No alarms were raised. No sirens. Just silence, and a plan being set into motion. Mamadou arrived within minutes, his boots echoing down the palace corridor. Traore handed him the file wordlessly, instructing him to read in silence. As Mamadou flipped through the transcript and intelligence assessments, his expressions shifted: disbelief, anger, disgust. "How is this even possible?" he whispered. "That's what I've been asking myself," Traore replied, his voice low, his eyes dark with resolve. "But it's true. And we have to act." They had less than 45 minutes before Connate would arrive. That time was precious. Traore reviewed every word he planned to say. He debated, should he arrest Connate immediately or confront him face to face? The soldier in him said act swiftly. But the statesman, the leader, needed to look his betrayer in the eye. Not just for justice, but for closure. Then came a quieter call. He dialed Fatima, Konate's wife. "Hello, Fatima. Sorry to wake you, but I need to speak with Musa. It's urgent." Within moments, Konate was on the line. His voice, calm and curious, betrayed no hint of suspicion. "Mr. President, what's going on? Come to the palace. Now. I'll explain everything in person." Traore hung up. He turned to Mamadou. "Whatever happens next, we do this together." Outside, the sun was rising. Inside the palace, a storm was forming. When General Musa Konate stepped into the presidential palace that morning, his demeanor was unchanged, calm, poised, respectful. He greeted the guards, exchanged a few quiet jokes with staff he passed by. Nothing in his tone, in his body language, gave away the storm that was about to erupt. He knocked on the president's door and entered when called. Inside, President Traore sat behind his desk. Mamadou stood silently by the window, arms folded, eyes locked on the man they had once called brother. The tension was immediate, dense as the early morning air. "Good morning, Mr. President," Konate said. He glanced at Mamadou but showed no alarm. "Is everything all right?" "Musa, sit," Traore said, motioning to the chair across from him. The general obeyed. Traore pushed the file across the desk. "Take a look at this." Konate opened it. Page 1, a transcript of the intercepted phone call. Page 2, analysis confirming his voice through tonal analysis. Page 3, details of financial transactions between him and the French mining company. As he turned each page, his face shifted from composed to stiff, then pale. His eyes flicked up. He didn't deny it. What is this, Mr. President?" "You tell me," Traore said coldly. "Isn't that your voice?" Konate closed the file. He didn't try to lie. Instead, he asked, "How did you obtain this?" "That doesn't matter," Traore snapped. "What matters is that my closest military advisor has been plotting to overthrow the government. Not only that, but with help from a foreign power." The room was silent for a long, suffocating moment. Konate inhaled deeply. "Mr. President, things aren't as simple as you think." "Don't patronize me," Traore growled. "You betrayed your country. The country is in crisis. The people are unhappy. Isolation will destroy us," Konate said. "I didn't plan to harm you. It was about stability, about transitioning power smoothly before things spiral." "You call house arrest smooth?" Mamadou burst out. "You were going to tell the people their president had gone insane. It was the only way to avoid bloodshed." "No, Musa," Traore said. "It was the way to restore French control, just like the old days. You were ready to hand back our sovereignty like a gift." Konate's expression hardened. "We're heading into a dead end, Ibrahim. Russia isn't the savior you think they are. You're playing with fire. So instead, you'd put the fire back into France's hands?" "I was trying to protect what's left of this country," Konate said, voice rising. "I still am." "That's not protection. That's surrender," Traore replied sharply. "And you did it for power, not patriotism. How much did they promise you?" "I didn't do this for money," Konate snapped. "No? Then what, ideology? Loyalty to France?" "I was trying to save this country from isolation." "You were trying to save your influence," Traore replied coldly. "And now, you've lost it." He picked up the phone. "Security command. Come to my office." Moments later, a senior officer entered. Traore didn't hesitate. General Khanate is hereby relieved of all his duties. His rank is revoked. He is no longer a member of the armed forces. Escort him out of the palace. Immediately. Khanate stood, stiff and stunned. Mr. President, don't rush this decision. We can still. There's nothing left to discuss, Traore said. You are now a citizen. And if you ever attempt to act on those plans, the consequences will be far more severe. As Khanate walked out, the silence was heavy. The door closed behind him, and the betrayal was complete. Traore turned back to the window. Outside, the sun had fully risen over Ouagadougou. The people were waking up, unaware how close they had come to losing everything. The confrontation was over, but the war within wasn't. As soon as General Khanate was escorted out of the palace, President Traore knew the next steps would be just as critical, and far more delicate. Betrayal at the highest level wasn't an isolated incident, it was usually the tip of a hidden network. Within the hour, Traore convened an emergency meeting with the nation's top military leadership. The tension in the war room was palpable. The generals whispered among themselves as they waited, wondering what storm had led to Khanate's sudden dismissal. When Traore entered, his presence silenced the room. I had to make a difficult decision this morning, he began. General Khanate has been removed from all positions. The reason? He was involved in activities that threatened the sovereignty of our nation. A shocked murmur rippled across the room. I cannot disclose all details for national security reasons, he continued, but I want this to be clear. Anyone who acts in the interest of foreign powers instead of our people will be treated the same way. There was a moment of collective silence. Then, one by one, the generals voiced their allegiance. The Chief of General Staff stood and declared, Mr. President, the army stands with you. We reject any betrayal of our people's will. But Traore wasn't just listening to words. He watched body language, tone, expressions, searching for cracks. The real battle was identifying those still loyal to Khanate's vision. In the days that followed, a quiet purge began. Officers whose names appeared in Khanate's plans were discreetly transferred to non-strategic roles. Intelligence reports were reviewed. Financial transactions were analyzed. All foreign connections, especially with French or Western-linked entities, were re-evaluated. The president ordered a complete audit of internal communications, especially within elite army units. A loyalty verification system was proposed for all high-ranking officials. Every command, every meeting, every contact would now be monitored. Traore wasn't acting out of paranoia. He was acting out of necessity. The enemy no longer came from outside the borders, it was seated at the same table, wearing the same uniform. In the weeks following the confrontation, the full scale of General Khanate's network began to unravel. What began as a single intercepted call had exposed a web of influence stretching across the military, civil service, and even the business elite. Some conspirators had been bribed. Others were driven by fear, ambition, or quiet loyalty to the old order, a system still tethered to foreign influence and colonial shadows. Traore took action with quiet precision. Several officers were reassigned to remote outposts. Civilian officials suspected of being part of the plot were quietly replaced. The French mining company at the center of the surveillance was stripped of its license and forced to halt all operations in Burkina Faso. The message was clear: sovereignty was not for sale. Meanwhile, Khanate, now stripped of rank and dignity, fled the country under the guise of pursuing education abroad. In truth, he had been exiled, a silent pact between the government and international stakeholders to avoid further escalation. He settled in Ivory Coast, where he began working at a consulting firm widely understood to be a front for French intelligence. But despite the purge, the scars remained. For President Traore, the betrayal was more than political, it was deeply personal. It taught him that the fight for independence was not just against external powers, but also against internal erosion, compromises made behind closed doors, loyalties traded for influence. He began to govern differently. Less idealistic, more vigilant. He knew now that trust had to be earned, and constantly tested. He increased funding for intelligence operations, created a special bureau to audit high-level officials, and demanded full transparency from his cabinet. Yet, despite the weight of betrayal, Traore also understood one thing: the system had bent, but it hadn't broken. And that meant something powerful. His leadership had been tested, and survived. And with it, so had the dream of a truly independent Burkina Faso. As the sun fully rose over Ouagadougou that morning, President Ibrahim Traoré stood at his window once again, watching his people begin their day. In the markets, vendors opened stalls. Children walked to school, unaware that just hours earlier, their country had stood at the edge of a silent coup. Most would never know how close they had come to losing their hard-won independence. But that's the burden of leadership, to carry the weight of what must be kept quiet in order to preserve peace. The decision Traoré made before dawn wasn't just about removing a general. It was about drawing a line in the sand. It was about declaring, once and for all, that Burkina Faso would not be dragged backward into the arms of foreign control. That no matter how powerful the forces at play, no matter how close the betrayal, the will of the people would remain sovereign. He didn't need to make a public spectacle. He didn't need to declare war. His actions spoke louder, precise, unwavering, decisive. And they sent a message, not just to his enemies, but to his people. Freedom demands more than passion. It demands vigilance. And on that morning, Traoré proved he was ready to pay the price. If this story moved you, if you believe that leadership means protecting your people even when no one is watching, then share this video. Let others know that in the heart of Africa, the struggle for dignity and independence is alive and well. Because the fight isn't over. And Connate wasn't the only one. Subscribe for Part 2, France's Hidden Influence in West Africa, Exposed.